What's up, YouTubers? Today we're going to talk about the Civivi Cogent. This is the much anticipated button lock from Civivi following their, I won't say failed attempt, but a knife that I'm actually not going to compare it overly to, and that's their button lock Elementum. The button lock Elementum was, it messed up in a couple areas. They actually nailed the stonewashed blade, was fantastic, but the way that they implemented the plunge lock here, they basically decided to slice the end of the tang a little bit, use a little piece of the liner, and use the spring tension on the steel there to come out, and it actually, you might even be able to see that. That it is not a true plunge there in terms of a solid hunk of metal, and it can actually slip off. When I did my initial review of this one, I hadn't yet disassembled it. I later wanted to go ahead and do the micarta scales in burgundy. Those turned out great, but that's when I learned and kind of looked a lot closer at it. And so that's where I think the comparisons end on this knife. This is not a preferable button lock. So we'll move that one to the side. And another knife that I'm not going to compare it to is the Protech Malibu. It is a plunge lock as well, and it's a great knife, but it carries very differently. It's so much smaller, lighter, different feel in the hand, different blade shape. There's just really not. I found a whole lot of kind of comparison. There's many other options out there, and notwithstanding the price. In fact, in terms of an actual use knife, I found that the Protech Mordax button lock was a lot more, it just felt much more like it in hand in terms of a good, good feel in the hand, a little bit bigger, bigger carry, and a little bit bigger blade too. So, actually kind of putting those side by side, they're very similar in terms of that carry. So I think the Mordax, but that was like a $250 knife. So that is not really going to be too much of a close comparison. In terms of some actual comparisons though, really, for me, the Orion knife Solaris, it just has a little bit shorter blade. But they have the exact same blade stock, which is it was 3.0 millimeters exactly, somewhere in between like 0.11 and 0.12, I guess 0.115 inches. But yeah, that's definitely, and this one also has, the Orion knife Solaris has 14C28 and blade steel as well. So that's really what I think is a good comparison. This one with the extra scales, I think it was like $80 or $90 to basically deck it out as my Green Goblin. So this comparison is going to come into there. And then lastly, my very first plunge lock knife, which was the Hogue X03. This one goes for I think $110, $120. It does have basically just a hard FRN sort of scales. There's no kind of metal lining in there, but it is integral. And it is a thumb stud only deployer. So I'm not going to do just nothing but comparisons. I do want to talk about this knife. So the great things on this knife are that they got the fidgeting right. They got the fact that create a full plunge. So if you take a look at that, you can actually see that piece of metal sinking in there, and that is a full plunge. So for safety's sake, a very good thing on that. Definitely nailed the fidgetiness. Regarding that plunge, actually the button, I will say, on this one is nice and flush there, if you kind of hold it up flat. And that's one of the things that it nailed that the Protechs do have. You can see that they nail that there. And unfortunately, I will say the Orion knife Solaris doesn't have that. So that button kind of sticks out a little bit proudly, which we'll talk about when that comes into play. But generally speaking, it's not going to really come loose or hit that loose in your pocket or anything like that. So that's where having that inset down in there is a great thing. Super much like that. I wish they had actually made this one with just a stonewash blade. Like I said, with the original Elementum button lock, they nailed the stonewashing on that one, and it looks like underneath here that this was stonewashed, but then they blackwashed all of them, including even the Damascus one. And I just wish they had not done that one. Speaking of the blade here, I think the clip point is useful. It definitely slices well. It does not slice as well as the Orion knife Solaris. Again, if you take a look at the blade heights of these, this is nearly a full flat grind on here, but the Solaris actually just goes a little bit higher. And when you just start taking to boxes, that little bit extra height gets that little bit more acute edge down there, and it definitely cuts better than this one. So On that front, I would say this is pretty good. I like that it's a tall enough blade. This is really, I think, well, yeah, this is essentially, it looks to me like the Civivi Relic, but without the tweezers, and also just with the button lock. So in terms of that, I think they kind of took from what they had, you know, in terms of design and that sort of stuff. So I just wish that there would have been a stonewashed option instead of having to blacken everything out. You know, I'm not entirely sure why on that. But kind of moving down here on the button, we talked about the plunge is great. I will say the stop pin is a little thin. Again, it's also kind of tough to see. There you go. That's a good angle there. But that stop pin, if you're going to be flicking this thing thousands of times, which you will if you get one, you're going to find that you wish that you had a little bit bigger stop pin. And the Solaris definitely has that nice big fat stop pin there. So in that sense, I think that was you know, kind of middle of the road hit on that one. Moving down, they did skeletonize the liners very well. Did a great job of that. Again, 3.8 ounces for what you're getting here, and the overall beefiness, a nice 3.5 inch blade is a very good. The comfort in the hand is fantastic, whether you're doing pull cuts or your standard saber, you know, hammer grip. Those are all very good. And one of the things that I always check out whenever I have a button lock, because the reason that they make such good work knives is when you're using gloves. I do prefer the X03, this one, because it does have the thumb studs. Thumb studs are very easy to get access to when you have gloves that are kind of big and bulky around there. This one does not have thumb studs, and the flipper's pretty small and slight. You can get to it, but it doesn't really open with as much authority. Also, that's one of the drawbacks of having that what I overall do like how it's inset down into the G10 there, is you can't do the old push the button easy enough to get it out. I mean, I've practiced enough with this, but you know, you just pick out your knife and you kind of push on it. It's like, it's kind of inset down there, and it takes a little bit of effort to get down in there. Whereas about, you know, the Solaris, again, you push the button, it's very easy because it does have some of that pride sticking out, much easier to get to. On the safety side, however, when you're talking about putting it, or the actual use of it, what's great about this is sometimes with button locks, and this has happened with my X03 as well, is with the gloves on, the inside of your thumb will push against the button when it sticks out when it sticks out with too much pride. So like this one right here, I have had it where it will kind of start to come loose. Hogue answered that by putting in a lock in place there. So that's their solution there. And then the Solaris doesn't necessarily have that, and that was kind of one of the drawbacks when I did the full review of this. Is in this position, if you were to, you know, try to pierce something, your thumb with the extra material on the gloves can definitely cause that to come loose. Whereas this one is great. This one in hand, once you get it open, is perfect with gloves. So yeah, this is going to be a great user knife in that sense. So really appreciate that. Speaking of the scales here, the G10 texturing is perfect. They nailed it. This is not like Spyderco rough, you know, almost sandpaper that you can scratch your fingernails on. It's got just the right amount of texturing, and kind of like in the Civivi Statera, they have this nice little channel there. I kind of like that. It's just really solid in the hand. It's not going to slip out anywhere. You can get your hands wet on this and it's going to be great. The one kind of negative about that, though, that texturing, is they have a lot of tension on the pocket clip, which is a deep carry. It's not inset down, but it is a nice deep carry one, and it is the longer one. So I actually, in retrospect, upon carrying this, I wish they had gone with the shorter one that they did put on, the button lock Elementum. This one is just a little bit more comfortable in the hand, and I think is more as effective or more effective in the pocket. Its retention is not going to be as much as a really deep or a very long one like this, but this one, with the amount of spring pressure that there is on there, it definitely is very hard to pull out, and certainly not real easy to push in one-handed in your pocket. So the return back to your pocket is just not as good. Overall, you know, going to one last thing that's great is moving towards the end of the knife is the lanyard pin is fantastic. So they have that little guy right there. It's beautiful. It has nice pillars on it that are, you know, basically angled. You know, versus whereas on the button lock Elementum, they just, you know, a good old slab of pin. Now they did have the micarta backing it up there, but I really like this lanyard. So very good. You know, from tip to tail, this knife, they nailed it. The only thing, if I had one gripe, is if they can find a way to get some thumb studs on this thing. I don't think it would have to get too much in the way of the cutting path. You know, I did kind of appreciate that. You know, from a cutting perspective, it cut nice. It didn't cut as nice as like the tall Solaris, but it did cut very nice. And I'm just thinking about if they could get some thumb studs in there for when you are wearing gloves, and then just kind of scallop this thing down. Oh, this would be perfect. They do have the pocket clip available on both sides too, so it is ambidextrous. Actually, yeah, left-handed. I'll show that real quick. Left-handed works really well for button locks, and with this one having the clip reversible, really good. So I do see a future comparison, or actually a battle to the death between the Solaris and the Cogent. I'm gonna have to use this one a little bit more. This is my user Solaris. I actually like the Solaris so much. I had one that I made into a safe queen. So that's how much I really like that knife. And so yeah, go get yourself a Cogent. Am I being clear enough? Yeah, this is just a really good knife. They nailed it. Absolutely. The jimping on top. Yeah, there's really, you know, that pretty much covers it from tip to tail. And yeah, great knife, great buy, and definitely a treasure of the year. One of the great budget button locks, plunge locks you're going to get. Take care. I hope you did enjoy this. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you did, and have a great day. Bye. What's up, YouTubers?